Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo, and I'm here today to bring you guys what we could technically call my first impressions for Fallout 4. I'm actually going to title the video that because I'm trying very hard to not make this like a traditional first impressions because there's so much of Fallout to me that is important that I don't spoil. Obviously I would never do any major spoilers, but for me the small stuff kind of matters, you know, like, I mean, I think we should just sit on this rooftop technically for the length of this entire discussion. This is as much as I want to show you guys. There's the city of Boston and stuff. And let's just leave it at that, right? That's what I would like to do. But I imagine that would be a little bit absurd, so I have filled the rest of the space with actual just combat in really boring places that aren't that interesting. Because, you know, for me it was like going into Fallout, I think it was important to see as few locations as possible. Like, I wanted it to be special when I went to, you know, this building or that building for that quest line. I didn't want it to feel like I've seen the place before because I think Bethesda always does such a good job at creating locations and making worlds that come to life. And I think Fallout 4 is sort of their, what would you call it, piece de resistance? Like, it's honestly like some of the best work they have ever done. Like, if you thought Skyrim was great, Fallout 4 is just the next level of awesomeness. The world of Fallout 4 is immense. It's insane, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous, it's detailed, it's deep. There are nooks and crannies, back alleys, and hidden buildings to be explored and discovered. It's such a wonderful place to spend your time. And in the 15 hours that I've played the game now, I feel like I've barely scratched the surface. So we're going to talk about, you know, how I feel about the combat system, all of that stuff, and again, we're going to keep it as spoiler-free as humanly possible. Honestly, if you don't want anything to be spoiled at all and you're not getting this game till Christmas, it's probably best that you just don't watch any Fallout 4 content at all. But if you're someone who doesn't care about hearing just my opinions and thoughts on the different systems, again, nothing about the story will be spoken about here, then you can stick around and we can break it all down because there's a lot to talk about. Probably not going to cover every little detail, but I'm going to talk about the stuff that has stood out the most to me and I think that has been the most significant to me. I think first and foremost, though, let's get the bugs out of the way. Let's let's talk about the bugs and get all of that out of the way. The discussion of performance and things to that. Now, I'm playing it on the Xbox One. That's the first platform that I picked it up on. I'll probably grab it on PC at a later time for the sake of mods, but right now I'm playing it on Xbox One. And there were a lot of reports with like heavy stutter issues and frame rate drops. I've seen the frame rate drops. I've seen them in, you know, Diamond City, the main city, and some of the more complex areas. But frankly, it hasn't been as bad as some people have advertised. This could just be my personal experience. It could be worse for others. It could be better for others. And in terms of actual stutters and like freeze ups, I haven't really seen any of those. I know there were some serious reports on, you know, actual like 1 to 2 second like stutter freeze ups. I saw them, they existed. I haven't personally been hit with them, and that's great because I was really worried about that, and some of those looked really bad. Like the game was locking up for like a whole second at times, you know, several times within the course of like 15 or 20 minutes. I haven't had any of those issues, even in the more detailed areas, even in combat. The game has ran really well for me on Xbox One, and it looks gorgeous. I mean, this is a great looking game, whether you're playing it on PC, PS4, Xbox One. It is beautiful. The visual quality, the graphics, you know, the sound design, all of those details have just been absolutely nailed. And I guess that's a good place to start. You know, let's talk about the actual visual appearance of the game. You know, apart from the world design, which is wonderful, it's, like I said, it's super detailed. The city, for the first time, like I'm completely overwhelmed by the creation of a city within a game. I think usually when games try and do cities, you know, you end up with like New Vegas, which was understandable. It's a technical limitation. But I can completely understand why this is running at 30 FPS on 1080p on the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, because the city of Boston is insane. Like the fact that they were able to get this kind of performance, in my opinion, on consoles like this, which, you know, whatever, the software's dated, they haven't really wrapped their heads around it yet. Regardless, I just did not expect to see this sort of performance at 1080p on the Xbox One. I was expecting 900p. That's what everybody's sort of doing. You know, they're upscaling 900p to 1080p for a lot of their games, and they didn't do that. And when you see just how detailed like the city outside of Diamond City is, you're gonna be blown away. They've done a really amazing job with that. And again, they have this really huge open wasteland that actually feels so dense. You know, like all the areas outside of Boston. I haven't even really left the corner of the map yet at 15 hours. And I haven't touched all of the things that are in that one corner of the map yet. There's so many layers within each of these little sections. It is just a very dense world. And it's not like they just slapped things there for the sake of being there. There's just all these cool, again, little hidden nooks and crannies that make sense in the world. Bethesda, I think, does that better than anyone else. You play so many open world games, and the edges of the map, the corners of the map, all the empty spaces, they feel like empty spaces. An empty space in a Bethesda game is never truly an empty space, and I think that holds true here inside of Fallout 4 more than it has in any of their other creations. But the color palette, you know, the visual design, everything that they've went for, I think is great. Like, to me, this is the best example of a wasteland that I've ever seen, you know, post-apocalyptic world, I should say, because we are still in a inhabited area of Boston. I think they've just done such a great job with it. The colors, the reds, the greens, you know, that sort of pastel color scheme they went with, I think just stands out so well. It fits, you know, the sort of 1940s era that they're going for. I know it's like 2077 now, but you know what I'm saying. And I think it just makes the world like a really wonderful place to be. Like, it's fun to just sit on top of a pastel red couch on top of a building and watch the sunrise. You know, they've done a good job at making the world feel like an actual living, breathing world, despite the fact that it's not a very good one. It's filled with miserable monsters and creatures. Everybody's trying to kill you. They've captured that as well. Audio design. Amazing. Like, you hear it in combat, you see, you know, all of the things that have been done in combat, and it all comes together, and the game, again, it just feels much more alive because of how well the audio has been done. I think just all of the weapons have such unique sound effects for them now. Like, the laser rifles are some of my favorite. They sound insane. It's like this little crazy, you know, you actually feel like you have something that is generating a personal laser. Like, I feel like the idea of that should be pretty significant, and most games have kind of just downplayed it, and you get the classic sort of pew pew. It's not like that in Fallout anymore. I mean, just the laser firing is insane. It sounds crazy. And that goes for all of the weapons. They've really, I think, have nailed the audio design, and that, again, is a big part, I think, of what brings the world together. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the radio stations without actually spoiling it. There's two radio stations. There's the Classical and there's Diamond City Radio. Diamond City Radio has, I think, the most interesting direction for a radio host that they've ever gone with a game. You know, I was expecting this big, you know, sort of triumphant entrance of someone famous, you know, once again, doing the radio voice, you know, Three Dog, and then we had, you know, the King in Law, we had, you know, Mr. New Vegas himself, Wayne Newton. But this time they have this guy who's like, you know, shy. He feels like somebody's holding a gun to his head the entire time he's broadcasting. And it's hilarious. Like, you stop, you listen to it, you laugh, and then you go back to the music again. The music itself, there's a bunch of original music. We talked about this on the Pipcast that has been written for the game. There's a bunch of new music that's been introduced in the game, again, from that time period, and then a lot of returning favorites. As this is technically the same sort of time period era as Fallout 3, a lot of that same music is around. You know, Butcher Pete and, you know, the Ink Spots, all of that's still here. You're going to hear some of your favorite songs from Fallout 3 back inside of Fallout 4, and I'm A-okay with that. Let's talk about difficulties. Let's talk about the overall challenge of the game and the difficulty settings that you have. Now, they don't actually make you select a difficulty right at the start of the game, like they've done in past Fallouts. So you basically change it on your own time. It's set to normal by default, but you can go down to easy, very easy, hard, very hard, and then there's a mode called Survival, which I've played the game on for the last 14 hours. And have absolutely fallen in love with. Basically, it's like a modified version of the hardcore mode that was available in Fallout New Vegas. So take away the water requirement from Fallout New Vegas and just focus on the idea that anything you use to regen HP now happens over time rather than instantly. Whether that be stim packs, water, food, doesn't matter. It takes time to regen your health. That is basically what survival mode is, and it's played at the very hard difficulty. So it's quite a challenge. But not enough that, you know, I shut it off. I admit the first hour I played it, right, I was kind of like, I hadn't actually played that much of the game on normal, so, you know, it wasn't like a reference point, so I just stuck with it, and it turned out to be, you know, the only way I think I'll ever play Fallout 4. It's not actually that challenging. What it does is it makes you think smart. It makes you play the game as if you were actually in a wasteland and resources were actually limited. Like, you don't have a lot of ammunition for the more high-end weapons. So you do have to carry around the pipe pistols and the pipe rifles because that ammunition is more abundant. Everyone else is carrying it. You're going to be picking it up off of enemies constantly. So there's this really big focus on ammo conservation, utilizing your more power-based weapons, your more powerful high-end weapons in specific situations, and again, you know, reserving them for the harder fights and utilizing the cheaper stuff, the pipe pistols, in less difficult encounters. So that's an entire different like meta within the combat then. Again, probably because of the difficulty that I'm playing the game on, and I'm okay with that. There's a bit of like guerrilla tactics that have to go on, I think, when engaging the more difficult enemies, regardless of whether or not they're legendary, they're, you know, match for your level or not. Like super mutants right now in the game for me at 15 hours, you see it in the footage I have, they're a challenge. Like they do some serious damage. Bullets in general do serious damage, but getting meleeed by any enemy in this game, especially a super mutant on this difficulty level, is extremely detrimental to your health. Even in power armor, I've been killed by just bloatflies. Bloatflies and those bug sucker bugs, they will inject you with poison that can drain your entire health bar in like 4 seconds. There are just so many things that want to kill you in the Wasteland, and regardless of their size, their actual health capacity, they can and will do it very quickly if you're not aware. I love that. Like, the game feels so challenging in all of the right ways because of the way they've handled that system. I never feel like this bloatfly is just slaughtering me because he has an infinite health bar. The game isn't about really throwing squishy enemies at you. It's about throwing enemies at you that require you to think a little bit more smart, a little bit more intelligently to defeat them. Like, okay, what's the best way to take out a super mutant suicider? You know, I can let him rush at me all day long and try and shoot him from 2 feet away, in which case I'm gonna die because he's carrying a mini nuke, or I can get his attention, have him pull the mini nuke out, and then shoot the mini nuke and blow him and all of his friends up. That's so freaking cool, right? And there's so many opportunities to do things like that, to do smart combat engagements inside of Fallout 4. It's the most enjoyable combat that I think I've ever had in an open world first person shooter, an open world game in general. Like, it asks the player to just think about the resources they have on hand and how they can use those resources to overcome any given situation at any time. That to me, just like, yes, Bethesda, well done. I think the thing that's really gone through my mind throughout the course of my time with Fallout 4, like over and over and over as I've been playing it, is just like how many, it just feels so, like, it feels leaps and bounds ahead of Skyrim. Skyrim is the last, you know, thing that they actually did. And I think that this game alone is like the poster child for why developers should throw away, why publishers should throw away the whole annual development cycle thing. Like, I'm not saying Fallout 4 breaks a ton of ground and just completely, you know, changes what Bethesda's done with Fallout, you know, in Fallout 3 and what Obsidian did with Fallout New Vegas. It doesn't, you know, it's still an open world shooter with RPG elements, you know, but there's just, it's all about the details. And I've always said that with games, that I think it's more important to innovate and to change the way a game works in the details, you know, the small things, than it is to change the grand scope of it, especially when you have a formula that already works. Like Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, kick-ass games. We all love them to death. That's why we were so excited for 4. Skyrim, again, you know, great game. That's why we, you know, were excited for Fallout 4. We saw what Bethesda did with that. You know, it's about, again, introducing a lot of smaller mechanics that are really going to affect the way the player plays the game, and Fallout 4 is loaded with them. You know, earlier in the day, I talked a little bit about the settlement system in the tips video that I did. That, to me, huge thing, right? I mean, that was just, I think that was an addition that no one ever saw coming. When Bethesda announced that, that was like, wow, dude, we're gonna be able to like leave our footprint inside of the world. You know, we can change these areas, and each of those areas, the settlement areas that I've experienced so far, they feel large enough, they're varied enough that you really do feel like you're leaving an impact on the way the wasteland functions. And you know, there's things outside of just building on those locations. You know, you have trade routes coming there. There's raiders who now want to attack these locations that were basically desolate before. They had no interest. There was no humans to kill. There was no one to slaughter and string up. Now you've brought people to them and you've attracted raiders. It's now your job to go ahead and defend those locations from them. And I think their sort of like will to make sure that there was a ton of small systems in the game that the player had to deal with, you know, goes well beyond that. The new crafting system, I think, is a prime example of that. It's one of my favorite things. You know, no longer is it just, hey, why don't you grab all of the coffee mugs in this room because then you can sell them for caps. No, I'm gonna grab all those coffee mugs in this room because they give me ceramic, and ceramic allows me to make a certain modification for my laser rifle. And you know, that system carries throughout. There's now a reason to identify with all of those small junk items, scissors and, you know, packs of cigarettes and pre-war money. It's not just about selling them for caps, it's about understanding how they can be recycled and reused as weapon modifications, armor modifications, resources for building inside of your towns and settlements. Like, that has been taken to an entirely new level. When you pick up a coffee mug now, like I said, you know, it has a greater significance. A toothbrush is more than just a pile of half-rotted plastic. It's It's the next, scope for your assault rifle. It's the next, barrel modification for your sniper. Then, the list goes on and on and on. I think that system was it was ingenious. And it gives players a reason, I think, to be more pack rats than they ever were before. I used to be a huge pack rat in Fallout 3 and in New Vegas because it meant getting caps selling those items. Now I'm just like, how much of this leather armor can I carry back to my base? I'm probably going to have to come back for some of it later. Like, at this point in the game, I've left behind piles and piles of Raider armor inside of their buildings. Like, I cleared out one of the buildings in the smaller cities. It was loaded with Raiders. I killed all of them, and then I compiled all of their armor into like one chest, and I kept fast traveling back and forth because I wanted the leather scrap. I'm like, man, I'm going to be able to make like 16 different mods for my leather armor. There's this huge reason to spend like 5 or 6 hours in one place, even after you've killed everyone there. And I think that's why I feel like I've accomplished so little in the 15 hours that I played the game, is because everything that the game offers to you is so incredibly deep. And we're just talking about the core of it here. Now, let's talk factions, I won't say any specific factions, but factions are in the game. They've been handled more along the lines of the way Bethesda handled Skyrim. So, all these factions are there. Do them in your own time. Complete all of their missions the first 2 hours into the game. Just decide from here on out you're going to do nothing from that. And before you know it, you're 30 hours into the game and all you've done is one faction quest line. That's okay. And the quest lines themselves they're really rewarding. I mean, you get unique gear, you get weapons, you find new locations, you're gonna get armor from them, and they're actually fun. Like, I don't want to talk about the quest line I've been working on, but the one that I've been doing, like, honestly, the first 6 missions I've done for it, like, there are first-person shooters out there, single-player first-person shooters, that would have been like the first 4 hours of their game inside of an open world. Like, I think people tend to overlook just how insane, Bethesda is when it comes to handling, the missions and the quests inside of their open world games. And I think Fallout 4 is like the next level. Like, honestly, that blew me away more than anything. I couldn't believe, like, when I thought about it, I'm like, wow, dude, like, I feel like I just played like a small campaign from some crappy first-person shooter that came out over the last like 10 years. Except it's actually good and it's really well done, and it's inside of an open world, and it's in Fallout 4. So I think they really nailed that. The biggest problem I've actually had with Fallout 4 is a constant sense of being, of just being overwhelmed. I'm always overwhelmed right now. There's so much to do. I have the main story, which I haven't even touched. I'm 2 missions into the main quest line, and there's a lot of reason to do that. Once you understand what the story is sort of gonna be about, there's a huge incentive emotionally, I think, as well, to like continue that. But at the same time, there's that spot on the map over there. There's that empty area that you don't have a point of interest for yet, and it's intriguing and it looks cool. And there's fog rolling in. You want to go in that direction. You want to know what's over there. You want to know what's inside that building. You want to explore and discover. And that, to me, is what an open world game should be about. And Fallout 4 just does that at every single turn. You walk out of a building. You just got done spending 4 hours killing raiders, and before you even get a chance to walk 15 feet and hit the fast travel button to go back and sell all of the loot that you just got, you notice another door in another building, just nearby, or a cave or a subway entrance. And the game just kind of screams at you and says, go here, go there. And I think that's the interesting thing about talking to other people then about Bethesda games. And I say this time and time again, that Bethesda games are the best single-player multiplayer games. There isn't actually any multiplayer in Fallout or in Skyrim, but the idea that when you're done with the play session, you can turn to your friend and you can tell him your story and he can tell you his story, and those stories are completely different, just provides so many opportunities to share the different worlds that you are experiencing. They're the same worlds made by the same developers, but as one player to another, they're completely different places. My brother and I sat down midnight and said, let's play the game together. And, we both kind of did the hinting thing, like, did you go past that one door yet? Did you find that big yellow door yet? To make sure we didn't spoil the beginning of the game for each other. But after about 5 hours, it didn't matter because we were both in completely different directions. I'm walking around in power armor doing this, and he's fighting legendary Yao Guai somewhere else. We're both in completely different parts of the world, doing completely different things, just based on our own personal interests and emotional attachments to the way that the game handles different situations. It's awesome. It's Fallout 4. And I think I could go on and on talking about all of the other different things, but, you know, I really, like I said, my big deal with doing the first impressions for this game was, like, to me, it was important that, again, like, as many of the locations as possible were unknown to me. Like, I want to discover that building for myself. And I think I was right in feeling that way because inside of Fallout 4, it feels more significant than ever to find like a specific location. All of the locations that I've stumbled upon in the game thus far, just they feel so awesome. They feel so alive. You know, I talked about this when I talk about exploring, I always say that it's important to reward the player not just with loot or physical items, but reward them with the location that they've discovered. Make sure that that location feels unique, feels special, and it feels like there's something else there when they arrive. And Bethesda games always give you that, right? You go to a spot, it looks awesome, and then you find like that hidden basement entrance or that button that you press that opens up a doorway that you didn't know was there. Fallout 4 does that. It does that a bunch. It does that a bunch. It constantly rewards the player for exploring with gorgeous, you know, locations, unique locations, interesting locations that also happen to usually contain some sort of secret and some sort of awesome piece of loot. So Fallout 4, I think, it hits all of the right open world RPG buttons and then some. I think I can honestly say after 15 hours that this is one of the best, if not the best, open world first, you know, shooter RPGs I've ever played. It's just insane. Like, I'm so attached to the world. Like, I, for the first time, feel like an open world game could last me, you know, multiple years. Like, just there's so much to do here. Like, I don't see a reason to look forward to anything else because I already have the answer. Like, what am I going to play this weekend? Fallout 4. What am I going to play this weekend? Fallout 4. Like, there's just so much to do here, and that'll probably change after I dump, you know, some absurd amount of hours into it, but the fact that I can even consider spending 400 hours in a game and not having finished everything there is to offer, I think lends itself to Bethesda games and to Fallout 4. Now, I didn't cover everything, guys. I tried to talk about it all. You know, the game looks beautiful. It sounds amazing. Actually, one last thing I do need to talk about is the combat system. Combat has just been completely revamped in Fallout 4. If you guys weren't aware, Bethesda went to id, which of course is an internal, you know, developer with them. They're both under Bethesda, and was like, hey, you know, we need your help. And then they said, okay, let's look at some of the best first-person shooter mechanics out right now. And they looked at Destiny, and they got their inspiration, they got some help from id, and they crafted the first-person shooter system that is inside of Fallout now. Of course, you can play it in third person if you like as well, and it's amazing. Like, for the first time, there are reasons to use the standard first-person shooter system outside of VATS. Like, in the past, it was you used VATS because the first-person shooter controls were so damn bad. Now, it's like they both have their own situations where they excel. For example, in the footage you guys saw when I was fighting the Super Mutants, I found that, you know, Super Mutants are like, they're one of the #1 enemies where I need to stay at distance. Because when they come in close and start to melee you, they, as I said, they will absolutely end your day. So staying as far away as I can, outside of my capable VATS range, is where I'm going to be able to do the most damage safely. So that meant stepping back and actually using the scope system, you know, using my breath system, burning some action points to land critical sneak shots with the sniper rifle at a distance. And that's the cool thing, is that even when you're in danger or when you've been slightly spotted, if you're out of the line of sight of an enemy and you crouch, you can still get those critical hit bonuses. I don't know if that's a bug or that's intentional, but I dig it. And it means that you can be that guerrilla sniper. You can engage the super mutants up close, you can throw some frag grenades, then you can retreat back to the woods behind a car and start to pick them off one by one as they rush you, again, outside of VATS. VATS, you know, again, having its own set of strengths and weaknesses, the ability to land those more critical shots in close range situations. And I often found myself as well understanding that, you know, VATS isn't the go-to just because it says I have a 98% chance to hit. There are situations where now that VATS no longer completely pauses the game, like, you know, these enemies are still in motion. The last thing you want to do, in my opinion, is VATS a missile launcher and then try and fire it on like a Deathclaw. Because chances are, it's not going to do much damage to that Deathclaw, and in the meantime, you're fumbling around in VATS, that Deathclaw is just closed about 10 feet on you. You better hope that you can get out of there, cancel that reload, and start sprinting as quickly as possible, because he is going to tear your head clean off. So I think that's everything that I want to talk about, you know, without going any further and spoiling story and, you know, the different factions and the things of that nature. I mean, Bethesda's just, they have managed to exceed in so many locations that even if I do run into some terrible quest-breaking bug in the next several days within the game, I'll be upset. I'll be angry that they weren't able to sort all those things out, but I don't think it'll matter because I'll just go in a different direction and I'll forget about that until they fix it. And I'll be more than content knowing that, I have like 500 hours worth of other things I can do outside of that quest. It's no big deal. I'll come back to it later. Does that make that bug acceptable? Does it make, a game that is littered with bugs acceptable? No, but in the 15 hours that I've played, this has been the least buggy Bethesda launch that I have seen on an Xbox console. I haven't ran into any game-breaking situations. There was a few times where the game crashed, twice in 15 hours, but otherwise everything is held up all right. So let me know your experiences, though. I really want to hear what you guys have to say about the game. Try and keep it spoiler-free for everyone down there. If I do see spoilers, I will just start flagging the comments and removing them. Just keep it clean, guys. There's a lot of people who are probably going to be watching this who haven't played the game. They haven't experienced it. They're looking forward to it. I've kept it spoiler-free. Make sure you do the same down in the comment section below. If you've run into any significant bugs or just hilarious bugs, Bethesda bugs are sometimes just absolutely funny without ever being, destroying to your experience. Share them down in the comment section below. If you have any other questions for me, as always, throw them down there as well, and I hope to see you wandering the wasteland.